Lawrence wasn't, didn't really want to sign an extension. So the signs were always there for him not wanting, let me not say not wanting, but it was hinting at him not really staying with the Giants. I didn't think the relationship between him and the Giants was this bad though, to a point where he'd request a trade straight up. Now we know the caliber of player Dexter Lawrence is. We know how good of a player he is, but I can't. This is very detrimental to the Giants overall. Dexter Lawrence is, of course, one of their best defensive players, and one of the reasons that they have the strongest defensive line in the league, I'd say, with him in the middle, Brian Birds, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter. That line looked to be one of the best in the league. With him gone, I mean, there's nobody there. I talked about this on prior shows, how the Giants lacked real depth at the defensive tackle position. Without Dexter Lawrence, it's no joke the worst unit in the league. I mean, who's there? Darius Alexander. You wanted to be your first defensive tackle. Chauncey Goldston, he isn't even a full-time interior defensive lineman. The Giants without Dexter Lawrence have nothing on the interior defensive line, straight up. And I don't really blame him for wanting to leave. He's spent majority of his career on a team that's not been very good. He's been one of the best defensive tackles on a team that has not, won a lot. He has been on a team that has won 7 games in the past 2 seasons. So I can't really blame him for a guy who's, I guess he's reaching his 30s and he wants to win, for not staying on a team that has not won consistently for practically his entire career. That being said, this sucks, bro. This really sucks for the Giants. I just mentioned how they have no depth at defensive tackle, but I was really excited to see this defensive line go up and play when Shane Bowen isn't calling the defense. I was excited to see a John Harbaugh-led group with a defensive line of, like I said before, Kayvon, Burns, Carter, and Dexter Lawrence. But it doesn't look like that's happening, and I'd bet good money that he's getting traded before the draft. It's the 6th. They have 17 days until the draft. He's probably going to get dealt before then. But this sucks. But I don't want to say that, the Giants won't trade him. I mean, I'm not going to say that, but he doesn't have a lot of leverage in this scenario. He's not getting paid a lot of money. No, I'm not going to say a lot. He's not getting paid a substantial amount of money comparative to what his future contracts would look. He isn't really, nearing the end of his contract. He doesn't really have like an incentive to sit out if he doesn't get traded. I feel like I feel strongly that even though Dexter Lawrence wants to, go out and go to a different team and win football games on a different organization, I feel strongly that the Giants have enough leverage in this situation where they could at least sit on their hands a little bit and feel the best offer. If you look at what Dexter Lawrence, how he played last season, he wasn't playing up to his standards. And you could say maybe that's because of Shane Bowen. Maybe that's because of, the injury to his elbow that he suffered the season prior. But it was clear that Dexter Lawrence hasn't been playing to his standards, and that the Giants and that he can't afford really to, as good as he's been at his peak, he can't afford really to just sit out for a full year if the Giants don't trade him. So that's the silver lining in this, that the Giants do have some kind of, I guess, pull in this scenario where they could really like field and get the best offers for him. But when I look at how layered, his, I guess you could say his career is, it's hard to field his exact value. Because, I mean, Dexter Lawrence at his best, I think I said this before, best defensive tackle in the league, best nose tackle in the league, probably a top 15 player in the league. Now, he didn't play like that this prior season. Again, elbow injury, Shane Bowen. Yeah, you could give your reason for that, but it's not really, you can't really quantify what teams will be willing to shell out based off of, that season that he had last year, the seasons he's had prior than that. It's not really, you can't really field whether he'd be worth like a first round pick or more, a certain type of player. It's hard to because you can say it's hard to like materialize how much you'd be getting for Dexter Lawrence in your mind, but at the very least that this strongly changes how you're approaching the draft, right? You have to assume that you're going to get picks for Dexter Lawrence. I think that's fully on the table. But since you're trading Dexter Lawrence, you're probably going to need to draft multiple defensive tackles to at least have like a good interior pass rush ecosystem in a sense. Let's say you get a second and a third. You're probably approaching the 5th overall pick a lot differently. You're probably approaching the 37th overall pick a lot differently. You're probably approaching those new selections a little differently. And honestly, with the money that you're going to clear off with Dexter Lawrence's contract, you're probably going to sign a veteran defensive tackle, whether that be Calais Campbell, Shelby Harris, all those guys. I feel like this, obviously depending on what we get, as much as this sucks and as much of a wrench in the Giants' plans as this is, I feel like if John Harbaugh, if Joe Schoen, if they all approach this, this hitch in the ride appropriately, you probably might end up, exiting this fiasco. I don't want to say better, but you might end up exiting this this situation either equally or better than how you entered it. The draft, though, we got to talk about the 5th overall pick. Assuming Dexter Lawrence gets traded, I think that I feel like that might give the Giants a little bit of extra wiggle room. Of course, I don't know his market value. It could be anywhere between like a first round pick or, a high second or like a player in a mid round pick. But I have to assume that trading down is looking a lot more attractive with the idea that Dexter Lawrence is going to be off this team. Now, the options are obviously there. The Giants held their meetings with I think they used some of their top 30 minute meetings. They used it on Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Mekhi Lemon, Jeremiah Love, all those guys. Well, I mean, you could remove Arvell Reese and Mekhi Lemon. Those guys are going to be available at 5. We know that for sure. Jeremiah Love, I mean, there's been a multitude of debates around whether you'd want him, on whether you'd want to pick a running back at 5 after, of course, the Saquon Barkley fiasco. Sonny Styles, there's been a lot of talk around him. But I think with Dexter Lawrence being off the team, the discussions on trading down is going to be a lot more prevalent, because the reason a lot of people would like to trade down is you have holes on this roster that the 5th overall pick, especially if you're not picking one of those extreme positions of need, if you pick Jeremiah Love or I guess you could say Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs, trading down would allow you to acquire the assets to maybe get a cornerback, maybe get Mansour Delane, maybe pick up a wide receiver that you're not, that you don't have. And with another hole being opened up, which is Dexter Lawrence leaving the team, assumedly, then trading down becomes even more attractive to, I guess, the vast majority of fans. When you look at the picks they have, I think even with compensatory picks, they only have 2 picks in the top 100. They don't have a lot of premium selections. And when you look at the, chasms in the rosters. Like I've hammered hard on the point that Deontay Banks cannot be your third cornerback. I'm not comfortable with Greg Newsome starting at cornerback. I'm not really comfortable with having a Marcus Bowe and Evan Neal training camp battle to see who'll be our starting guard. I'm fine with Micah McFadden, but it could be better. I'm fine with the wide receiver trio we got with Slayton, Mooney, and Calvin Austin, and I guess Isaiah Hodgins, but they can be better. All of these, all of these positions that we could use to improve, they all would benefit with a trade down. And when you add one more, and by the way, defensive tackle was already a position that the Giants were searching for. Now you need it even more. When you add that additional, roster, you deepen an additional hole. Trading back, it kind of seems like it's the I guess it's the most reasonable outcome for this. Trade back options. I mean, it's been talked at nauseum. Mansour Delane, maybe you could trade back, and if Caleb Downs falls to you, I don't really know. But I feel like defensive tackle names start coming up more and more now that Dexter Lawrence is gone. At first, defensive tackle was, I guess, seen as a veteran guy you could get to put behind Dexter Lawrence, or maybe a guy you could get in the fourth round or something. That's not really negotiable now. I feel like for the Giants, if you don't take a defensive tackle in at least the first two rounds, it's going to be very difficult to feel comfortable about this interior pass rush rotation that they have going on. I think I mentioned this before, but your first defensive tackle is Darius Alexander, and you have, outside of that, what is it? I don't think Nacho's is not on the team. You got Robertson Harris, and then a bunch of depth guys. That can't really stand, right? Like I said, I think before free agency, I said you need to sign two linebackers. You need to add two linebackers, and they added Tremaine Edmonds and they added Micah McFadden. I feel very similarly about the defensive tackle position. I feel like through the draft, or maybe if you sign a veteran that's still available, there's a lot of good players still available. You need to add at least two defensive tackles for it to at least be passable in my eyes. Again, I don't think you're ever going to really replace the ceiling that Dexter Lawrence brings. I don't think you could replace that through just the draft. Especially in this draft. This draft isn't particularly strong at the defensive tackle position, but I feel like if you go about this right, you could use Dexter Lawrence's need to leave as a tool to finally round out this roster in a way you see fit. I don't want to say this is kind of an opportunity, but this is a little bit of an opportunity for you guys. Okay. After the most successful excellent egg hunt in 1077 The Bronx history, we want to give a second Ryder Bronc the opportunity to win a cruise to the Bahamas. And all you have to do to win it is make a sandwich. It's really that simple. So what are you waiting for? Get in the kitchen, get creative, and enter 1077 The Bronx. Build the ultimate Bronkwich contest. Develop Ryder's new signature sandwich in your kitchen and reap the rewards. A Royal Caribbean cruise for two to the Bahamas from Josh Harry Travel. Go to 1077 The Bronx /build a Bronkwich right now to enter your sandwich creation. The deadline to enter has been extended to Sunday, April 12th. So get those entries in. We'll be back with more What's Next Sports after these underwriting announcements on your three-time 2026 Intercollegiate Broadcasting System Media's Award winner, 1077 The Bronx.
Oh, it's so hot. I'm so hungry. I could really go for a
So before the break, we talked a little bit about the Dexter Lawrence, trade rumors and stuff, and I talked about how that kind of changed things for the Giants, and how the Giants' entire offseason plan is now kind of thrown. I don't want to say thrown into disarray, but it's kind of molded a bit. Obviously, the organization wanted to keep Lawrence. Joe Schoen talked a lot about how the plan was to keep Lawrence, but Lawrence obviously had other ideas. He wanted to change the scenery, and can't blame him. The Giants have not been good these past few games, but I'm looking at some potential landing spots, and it seems like the consensus, and Jordan Renan tweeted this, it seems like the range for where he's gonna go, not gonna go, but the range for the compensation he's gonna pull would be a late first to early second round pick, which kind of makes sense because, if this was 2024, he'd probably pull in multiple first round picks, but due to last season and, the fact that he hasn't recorded a sack in over 20 games, that kind of, pulled his stock down a little bit. Still, he's very talented, and I feel like with the late first that the Giants are probably going to pull in due to Lawrence, they could, fill another, I guess you could say, hole in the roster. Maybe if they get like a pick in the early 20s, which that'd still be a little bit of an overpay according to what the range is. If they get a pick in the early 20s and Caleb Banks drops to them, that'd be another good pickup. Maybe they could bring in Shelby Harris and then pair him with in this pretend scenario Banks, and I don't know. The Giants have a lot of thinking to do if they trade Dexter Lawrence, which it looks like they might do, but yeah, that's not the only thing that happened though. Dexter Lawrence, being traded isn't the only change that was made. The Knicks heading to the playoffs, that's obviously a big deal. We're gonna get into them later. We're gonna get into the Yankees a little bit. They won the series against the Marlins. They lost a tough one yesterday. They have another series coming up tomorrow. Cam Schlittler is pitching. That's going to be exciting. But, the second trade that happened, which I didn't want to neglect, is Angel Reese getting traded to the Dream, Atlanta Dream, away from the Sky, which that's actually pretty interesting to me because I'm not interesting. I don't want to say it's completely surprising because at the end of the last WNBA season, there was a little bit of friction between Angel Reese and the Sky. She got suspended for one half of that was weird. She got suspended for a half because of she said some statements in the media, whatever. Her teammates, they were acting weird towards her. There was a lot of friction between the Chicago Sky and Angel Reese. Simply. So I don't want to say that this trade came out of nowhere, but I don't think you see a team that often trade a player as good and as young as she is just like that. Now they got a pretty sizable haul. They got two first round picks and a second round pick swap, which that's what you'd expect, but I don't know. It's not every day you see a trade like that. And yeah, I don't know. Angel Reese going from the Sky. I thought her with Cardoso was a good tandem that they had last season. It sucks that we won't see that anymore, but the Sky really failed to structure a good I guess you could say a good offense around Reese and Cardoso. They didn't really have a point guard, and Angel Reese was forced to lead their team in assist, which I don't think that's where she's best fit. But yeah, I'd be very interested to see her on the Dream. But we have to get to the Knicks. The Knicks had a pretty interesting week last week. Last show I talked about that. Last show was their loss after the after the Thunder lost. That was that was last show. And I said that I'm very interested to see how they play against the Rockets, which they were playing that night. They ended up getting blown out by at least 20 points. They didn't play well, but their last game against the Bulls, they kind of, rounded things out, and they ended up beating them by 40, along with winning against the Grizzlies, which, you're supposed to win those games. I'm not going to throw a parade, but I'm going to say, I said this last show about how I'm interested to see how they do against a playoff team. And I'm even more interested to see how they do against the Hawks, because there's a very good chance that they're facing the Hawks in the first round of the playoffs. As bad as the loss was to the Rockets, and as disappointed I am that they lost to the Rockets, the Rockets are in the Western Conference. You're not seeing them in the playoffs unless they make the finals. So, as bad as the loss was, you're not too worried about that. But today at 7:00, they potentially are facing their first round matchup in the Hawks, and I'm very intrigued on how they perform against them. I stated my concerns with the Knicks. Even dating back to the 7-game winning streak when they were down 17 to teams that were actively tanking. I was very concerned with those with that level of play that they had. But I feel like if they have 4 games, okay, 3 of all 4 are playoff teams. The Hornets are playing teams technically, but they've been playing like one of the better teams in the league the second half of the season. So they have 4 games against teams that are playing really well right now. The Hawks, the Celtics, who that could be their round 1 and round 2 matchup. Be aware of that. They have a game against another team that could be their first round matchup in the Raptors, and they have a matchup against a team that they lost by a lot to a couple weeks ago, which is the Hornets. These are 4 games that I'm very interested in. They beat the Grizzlies and they beat the Bulls. That's cool. That's whatever. They're tanking right now. I'm interested to see if they could beat the Hawks, if they could hang with the Celtics, if they could beat the Raptors, and if they could beat the Hornets. If they win, I need them to win at least 2 games in this stretch. That's what I need from them. If they go 2 for 2, I'll be okay with that. If they go 3-1, I'd be ecstatic. If they, if they don't win at least 2 games, I'm going to be extremely concerned about, their chances going into the playoffs, because 3 of these 4 teams are teams that you're supposed to beat as a title contending roster. I understand that, I don't want to get too high on the Knicks. I don't want to, set the bar up way too high, but when you go into the season and when you're favorites heading into the season, you can't play around with teams like this. Like the Hawks are a playoff team, but they're the 5th seed. We're supposed to be a tier above them. We're supposed to be a tier above the Raptors. We're supposed to be a tier above the Hornets. Of course, the big game is the Celtics, which, that's huge for both the Celtics and us. That's a potential second round matchup, but I will be very disappointed if they don't win 2 out of these 4 games coming into the playoffs. Beyond the playoffs, and I think I'll get into official playoff predictions across the NBA next week, but if we look into the standings, we're the 3 seed. We're 1 game out of the 4th seed, meaning these 4 games are even more important, by the way. And we're set to face the Sixers right now, which I don't want to say I'm scared of the 76ers, but they're much better than the 6th seed. They played most of the season injured. Paul George didn't play for 50 games. Joel Embiid was, as always, he was nicked up a little bit. So the 76ers are far better than your average 6th seed. So I'm already concerned about that a little bit. And then you have the Celtics being the 2nd seed. That's who we'll face in the second round if get to the second round, and then of course, we assumedly would face the Pistons in the Western Conference, in the Eastern Conference Finals. But aside from the 76ers, potential matchups also include the Raptors, the Hornets, and the Magic. So those are four teams that are within one game of each other for the sixth seed. And that means, the Cavaliers, we could drop to fourth. If we blow this one game lead on the third seed, we could drop to the fourth seed and end up facing the Hawks, which that's fine too. But out of those four teams, it's tough. I'd most want to face the Magic, which, that may seem obvious because they're the ninth seed. But we've beat the Magic a lot this season. The Magic just lost by 50 points to the Raptors. It was like a 31-0 run against the Raptors. The Magic have been playing really poor over the latter half of the season, and I feel like we have the best shot against them. The Raptors, that'd be the team I want to play the second most, because we have like a 3-0 record against them. Of course, that's subject to change based on how we play against them this weekend, but I feel like that's probably the second best option. And then between the Sixers and the Hornets, those are two teams that are much better than their seeding, which is why I kind of want to avoid them, because the Hornets, they've been on like a tear, like an absolute tear for the second half of the season. They're like 8-2 in their last 10. They're on a 4-game winning streak. They beat us by a lot a couple weeks ago, and we play them again, so we'll see how we measure up against them. But yeah, the Hornets and the 76ers, I just mentioned how they've been injured a lot this season. Paul George is coming back, and he's dropping like 39 points. Those two teams are the teams that I really don't want to face in the first round. The other two I'm cool with, and it's pretty realistic that the Raptors or Magic, kind of sneak up into that sixth slot. But outside of that, I don't really like matchup checking, with the caliber this team is on. And I know the Knicks have looked kind of porous in recent weeks, and I've criticized them a lot. But again, this is a team that I expect to be in the finals. Let me not say expect. This is a team that I expect to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. That if they're not in the Eastern Conference Finals, that I am very comfortable with making massive changes. So if we're worrying about, who we're facing in the first round, then we might as well just not have the expectations that we do have. And the Knicks, this Knicks teams, they do have problems, and I hope they could iron them out, before the playoff time comes around. Those problems do include, Karl Anthony Towns not being really aggressive, Jalen Brunson, trying to find his stride again a little bit. I don't know if that ankle is hurting him a little bit, but he's been kind of, shaky these past couple weeks. But even outside of that, I'm not too worried about those two. I feel like they'll find themselves. I'm just hoping that the rotation, that we get like a good rotation for the playoffs. If we have Jose Alvarado and who else coming off the bench? Jose Alvarado, Diawara, Jordan Clarkson. If they keep on, putting up 0 spots when, we know they could play better, it's gonna be a little frustrating, Then you have Mikal Bridges. He's been not great this season. OG Anunoby has been a little bit shaky. He's been fine, but I'm very aware of the caliber that this Knicks team could play at. I'm very aware that they can play like one of the better teams in the league, despite how they've been playing recently. And I'm aware that they can hang with guys like the Celtics. They can hang with, the Pistons. I feel like it's not crazy to say that they could hang with the Pistons. that being said, though, I'm and with that being said, with that in mind, with what I know they could do in mind, if they do not indeed hang with the Celtics and hang with the Pistons in this offseason, then I am more than comfortable enough with scrapping some major aspect of this team. Is that Karl Anthony Towns? Is that Jalen Brunson? Is that, a trade for Giannis? Yeah, that's that's a pipe dream. But still, I know that when you get into this form of playoff purgatory where you're like perpetually a second round exit, it's a dangerous place to be in. We saw the Damian Lillard Portland Trailblazers get into this a lot. We see a lot of star players, good star players, just get into this range where they're like perpetually losing in the second or even the third round, and it's really tough to get out of there because it takes some like strong retooling efforts to kind of shift things around before a championship window closes. And I hope that the Knicks don't get to that point, but if they do, then I hope they have the guts to make that big move and to get out of it. Regardless, big week for the Knicks and big week for the entirety of the NBA. I do want to touch on one last Knicks point. I do want to try to predict the rotation going to the playoffs, because as much flack as the Knicks depth gets at times, they do have so many players that at times are rotational caliber, but like are kind of shaky, and it puts Mike Brown in an interesting bind. It's tough. I don't really know how many players in the playoffs that the Knicks are going to run in their rotation. It could be 10. Tibbs ran like a super small rotation, but that's like Tibbs, so he does that sometimes. But it could, they won. It could be 10, maybe 9. I'd lead 9. But it kind of leaves guys like Diawara or Clarkson. It kind of puts a question mark on if they're gonna play. Cause I'm thinking like, you have Brunson, Mikal, OG, obviously, Karl Anthony Towns, Brunson, Mikal, OG, Cat, Hart. You assume that's a starting lineup. I don't know if that's gonna be for sure. Then you have Deuce, Shamit, and Mitch. Those are like all guys who for sure are gonna be in the rotation. No question about it. Then you have guys that are probably going to be in the playoff rotation, or like who are 50% there. Alvarado, Jordan Clarkson, Diawara. Those are 3 guys that some might be in, some might be out. Then you have other guys like Kolek, Dadier, Huck Porty. Those are they're not going to be in the rotation. But I'm interested to see how the playoff rotations are going to shrink a little bit. If I was Mike Brown, I would want to see, and I know I put Kolek in the bottom tier. I really want to see Kolek work in this offense a little bit more, because we saw him at the beginning of the year, and we saw how good he played. I think nearing the play-in tournament, but after Jose Alvarado came in, he just kind of got relegated to the bench, even with the Deuce McBride injury, which is interesting. But I feel like Kolek could work. Even in garbage time when he comes in, he's so obviously I don't want to say better than everybody who's on the court, but better than the other, bench guys. He's obviously good enough to play in the rotation, but that inconsistency and that kind of got him kicked out. But yeah. It's not every day we get to be a hero. So we're giving you 2 days to be the hero to 3 people, all at one time. Announcing 1077 The Bronx annual Spring for Life blood drive, Wednesday and Thursday, April 8th and 9th, in the BLC Cavella room. Everyone who attempts to donate blood will get a pair of tickets to the Trenton Thunder game or passes to Sky Zone in Hamilton At the end of the drive, 2 lucky Broncs will each score $100 via Visa gift card for being a hero. To schedule your appointment to donate blood, go to our website at 1077thebronx/Spring for Life. We'll be back with more What's Next Sports after these underwriting announcements. While you're waiting for the return of my show, follow the Bronx on Instagram and on TikTok at 1077thebronx, WRRC. All right.
The Friends of a Feather Foundation was created in honor of Barbara de la
Okay. We've extended the deadline to enter the 1077 The Bronx first ever Build the Ultimate Bronc Witch contest. You now have until Sunday, April 12th to be the Bronc who creates a rider's new signature sandwich to be served at Muller's Pub and on the Yo Cuz Yellow Fruit trailer, and we'll send you and a guest on a Royal Caribbean cruise for a 2 to the Bahamas, courtesy of Josh Harry Travel. However you slice it, this contest eats Bronx. Remember, the deadline to enter to win a cruise has been extended to Sunday, April 12th. Go to 1077 The Bronx DexterSports.com/build-a-bronquich to enter your sandwich. Welcome back to What's Next Sports on the Princeton's Reviews number 18th ranked college radio station, 107.7 The Bronx. Okay. Last segment of the show, we talked a little bit about the Dexter Lawrence trade, how that, affects the Giants, not the trade, but the trade request and how that affects the Giants' plans this offseason. We talked about the Knicks, their playoffs, but we need to get into the Yankees for a little bit. We have a little bit of time left, and we have to talk about their, series against the Marlins and their concerns early in the season. Now, I've been one to say I've said that their starting pitching, the starting pitching jumps that they've made from this season to last season, their internal restructure that they've had, and the internal additions of Garrett Cole coming back from injury, Cam Schlittler being good, and Max Fried being Max Fried. Those all are very good. The starting pitching is some of the best in the league. At their best, obviously. When Garrett Cole comes back and Carlos Rodon comes back, when all of those guys come back and they have like a four-headed dragon of Garrett Cole, Rodon, Fried, and Schlittler, it's gonna be. I don't think there's a better starting pitching core anywhere in the league. They don't have some of those guys now. They don't have Rodon and Cole yet. And so some of the other question marks on this team is popping up a little bit more. I mentioned, and they only lost one game. They're still 7-2. So I'm not gonna be overly concerned, but I mentioned the problems and the issues with the bats, I guess you could say, other than Judge. And that's not as much of a problem this season. Ben Rice is having a fantastic start. Other guys are stepping up, like Cody Bellinger is being Cody Bellinger, Judge is being just, all these guys are good, and this was especially evident in yesterday's game. The bats from, I think, batter 6 to batter 9, they're horrible. They've been playing horrible. Jazz Chisholm, Austin Wells, Caballero, and who's not, McMahon. Especially McMahon. McMahon's been really bad. They've been virtually they've been very bad. And they're good defensively, and we'll get to that later, but as hitters, they've not been good to start out the season. Now, I'm not worried about all of them. I think Austin Wells will be fine. I think Jazz Chisholm, he'll settle back in as he usually does. McMahon, he's not going to play as bad as he's playing for the entire season, but we saw it evident, that these guys, the 6 to 9 range, they had runners in scoring position on multiple occasions last game, and they just couldn't just cash it in at all. They couldn't, buy a single or base hit. Eventually, Jazz Chisholm, he got a double near the end, but even after that, even when Jazz Chisholm cut it to 1, Wells, Caballero, and McMahon, they couldn't do anything after that. So the concern of consistency of bats through the lineup has popped back up early in the season, and I do think that this team is better set out than they were last year. I do trust the guys that are surrounding Judge a little bit more, but I can't help but feel like I'm watching the same story over and over, where all of a sudden I'm back in October and Judge is batting 400 and the rest of the lineup is batting 179, because that's what happened last year. And I try my best not to I guess you could say, take too much into account, especially in the early baseball season, and especially when we're only 9 games through. We're not even 10% through the season, and baseball is a super volatile sport, and the Yankees are 7-2. So I'm trying not to overreact to things like this, to little things like this, because that's just sometimes how baseball is. But I don't want to to look into the playoffs where the Yankees hope to go. Look into the World Series where the Yankees hope to go. And we have like large blocks in the lineup, like large sections in the lineup where you're like, oh, I know we're not scoring runs because these guys can't hit at all. And that's what's happening so far with the Yankees. But I'm pretty confident that, Chisholm, he's a very good hitter, regardless of what his early season statistics usually are. Even last year, he was not hitting well at all to start the season. Then he settled in. I feel like he's going to settle in. Wells is going to settle in. He's fine. Caballero, his strength is not in hitting. It's more so defensive and base running, but he's going to settle in. McMahon, he's definitely going to settle in. He's not going to bat 50 for the entire season. We know that. I just hope that it's not a theme that carries out throughout the entire year. I got to talk about the bullpen too a little bit. I'm going to touch on them before we end things off. Bullpen has been good for most of the season. They gave up some runs later in the year. I'd be interested to see if we could get Luis Gil. I don't think he's going to find a role as a starter on this team, how it's currently constructed. I don't think he's, even as bad as Weathers was, 2 days ago on Saturday, I think I'd rather have Weathers over him. And Weathers is probably not going to be a starting pitcher for the entire season anyway. So I would be against putting Gil in the bullpen and seeing what he could do. But yeah. I'm excited for the Yankees though, for the season. They're 7-2. I have a lot of belief in them. Next week though, I think it's going to be all basketball. We'll talk a lot about the playoffs and about the matchups there. But thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next Monday from 2 to 3. Stay tuned for more of the biggest hits and best variety on Princeton's Reviews. Number 18, the best college radio station, 3-time 2026 IBS Media Award winner, and 5-time NAB Marconi Award nominee for College Radio Station of the Year, 107.7 The Bronx.
You're stepping into the ring with 107.7 The Bronx, WRRC-FM, straight out of Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Like that one boxer said, hit like the Bronx.